rather than treating marketing like a tick box, which is again a pitfall that people fall into, of going like, oh, I need to put 3 posts out this week for the algorithm. I need to put 5 posts out this week for the algorithm, and like at the end of the day, the algorithm is literally humans and their behavior at the other end, by the way, because the algorithm is just going to put posts in front of people that are doing well. So basically, just put posts out that people are most likely to find value from. That's going to take care of most of what you think the algorithm is looking for, trust me. And again, that's definitely missed by a lot of people. It's about focusing on that value for content. It's not about arbitrarily thinking about what an algorithm is or what an algorithm does or like blah blah blah. I think this is more a commentary on human nature than it is on anything else.
Welcome to the Global Perspectives on Digital Health podcast. Today we are talking about communication. We have got one of the biggest names in Healthtech Comms representing clients from big tech to life sciences companies. It's really a privilege to have Dr. James Somauroo on the podcast. He's one of the founders of SomX, a healthcare media and communications agency. Why are we talking about this on the podcast? We've talked a lot about policy, regulation, implementation, trust in communities, and a big enabler of making sure all of this work that we're doing doesn't fall flat on its face is good communication. It's super important that people connect with your vision, your message, the impact that you've created. And so getting this right is, I think, and it's not given enough credit, I feel. I've worked in comms for a period of time as well. And making sure you get this right and get the balance right between telling your story and kind of sharing that in a credible way that resonates with people is a massive unlock for any of the work that we're doing, whether it's in policy, whether you're a founder, whether you're a product team. So it's really a privilege to have someone who has unlocked this for some huge organizations around the world. I think it's especially important for people who are trying to create impact with underserved communities to be able to do this well. And it can be the difference between, whether you get trust with the community, whether you get that impact investing, whether you get working with that health system. So really huge value add to go from, yes, we've got the substance and we've built the right thing, but how do you make sure you communicate that with the right people in the right way? Super important. If you find the Global Perspectives on Digital Health podcast useful, please comment, please share, please spread the word about it. It really helps reach people who are trying to build with communities who are underserved with digital health and help them with some of the challenges that they're facing. Thank you. Let's speak to James. James Somauroo of SomX. I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us. I think it's going to be so valuable for people to get your insights, having built SomX and having worked with some of the biggest names in digital health, biotech, life sciences, to talk to people who are creating impact in the global south and some of the things you've learned along the way. You've had such a varied and fulfilling career. We're going to learn a lot from you about this topic that I think is just so important and underrated in terms of criteria of importance for people often, especially in this space. James, tell us about you and your story and how you've created like one of the biggest health comms agencies globally right now.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's funny because in the intro, taking time out of the busy schedule and stuff, it's funny because one of the things that I try very hard to do is actually not be busy. I think as a leader, as a CEO, as someone that's trying to build a company and especially go from, where I am now to the next bit, I actually need to keep myself not very busy so that I can do two things, which is to capitalize on opportunities and solve big problems. And essentially, that's where I see my role right now, because growing a company is hard, man. I mean, the amount of startups like you've seen and been in and like done and like all this sort of stuff, like, how hard it is. And actually, if you get caught up in the day to day, you can be firefighting all day, every day. I could easily be firefighting, but at some point you have to cancel that meeting. You have to let people solve it themselves. You have to let one fire or a few fires burn. You have to juggle 20 things knowing that 10 of them are going to drop. You know, all these things ring true that, you know, my job now is I try and not keep myself busy so that I can keep one eye on opportunities and the other eye on the biggest problems to solve. But in terms of me, so I'm a doctor by background, so anesthetics and intensive care, practiced clinically for 5 years. I've done lots of different things in leadership, policy, innovation in the NHS and wider commercial health sector. So I've worked at NHS England, I've worked at Health Education England, I've worked at the BMJ, doing lots of kind of policy stuff. And then I ran a couple of different health tech accelerators, so helping startups anywhere between sort of seed and enterprise, basically. But the other side of my life was always media. So I used to write for Forbes on health tech as a contributor. I still have the login and can do, although it seems a bit of a busman's holiday to try and do that now that I've got a comms agency, but and Healthtech Pigeon list it. But yeah, so used to write for Forbes. That was great for journalistic experience and knowing how difficult it is to write good articles and write good copy and do good research, and gave me an appreciation for true journalism and, you know, the source and the search for truth, I should say, which is what journalism really is. And that skill is certainly one that I respect greatly from my time doing that. But yeah, as I say, other media stuff. So I run the Health Tech podcast. So we've got listeners around the world. I interview entrepreneurs and leaders across healthcare and technology. So over 400 episodes of that. And yeah, Healthtech Pigeon, Biotech Dodo, those are our news brands. So they are newsletters, and Healthtech Pigeon has a podcast as well. They go out to thousands of people across health tech and biotech, and they round up the news and give commentary on the news. But the main show in town for me is that I'm co-founder, CEO of SomX, and SomX is a comms and creative agency for health tech, biotech, and pharma companies. And we support those companies with everything under the comms and marketing umbrella. So we do communication strategy, we do multimedia content, we do press and PR, we do branding and design, we do events and community as a service, quite a new offering. And we also do media production as well. So your videos, your animations, all that sort of stuff, and true creative down on that side. And we bundle all of that together into retainers and projects and essentially do whatever companies need, purpose built for the space. I actually never wanted to start SomX, by the way. It was a very strange way that it came into existence. That I used 2 PR companies myself and had a very underwhelming experience. It wasn't their fault, but health tech was very new as an industry. And, you know, one of the things that we'll probably come on to talk about is when you're giving communications advice, you need to be telling your clients how to communicate. And so in a brand new industry, which was health tech, for a generalist PR firm at the time, you know, one part of communications PR, but, you know, I ended up rewriting the press releases, like redoing the science, redoing the clinical medicine, like redoing the technology stuff like that. And as I say, not the fault of any PR agency that tried their hand at it, but health is very binary. Health tech, even more specific, you know, biotech, pharma, these are all, you know, niche areas with specific audiences and specific messages, specific value propositions, specific jobs of people with specific pain points. All of these things build up a very complex picture. And so having had that underwhelming experience and realizing, hey, I've got a podcast, I've got a newsletter, I'm pretty good on LinkedIn, I could do content for health tech startups incredibly easy. I've run an accelerator, they've all got the same problem, which is marketing. And, you know, as luck would have it, my wife, Jessica, was director of Fleischmann Hillard, a big global PR firm. So her clients are big medical devices, big pharma companies. And so, yeah, it was pretty straightforward. She knows how to build an agency and to run an agency. And I knew the clinical medicine and the content. So, yeah, she did PR, I did content. We started with one client and started from the bottom. Now we're here, etc.
Super. What a journey. And just to say, you mentioned your podcast that you've got to 400 episodes, which is like absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, a great, you know, I think this is going to be like number 15 or 16 or something like that. Nice. So we've got a long way to go. But, you know, you've been a great advisor to me over the years. And actually, I think in one of your double figures number podcasts, when I was working at Ada, I had the privilege of like being on the other side with you talking on the Health Tech podcast as well. So I'm also thrilled to be able to like
return the favor. Absolutely
turn the tables and chat to you as well.
Well, as I say, return the favor, dude. No, that was absolute pleasure. It's funny, the podcast is it's a labor of love sometimes, and to get to 400 episodes isn't easy. I'd say the learning that I've done, like interviewing that many people about so many different health tech businesses and personalities, and routes into entrepreneurship or how they became a leader, and all this sort of stuff, because I tend to focus on themes around careers, leadership, entrepreneurship. That's generally the first half, and then the second half I'm drilling down into more of the health tech topic and the health tech nation. So yeah, honestly, man, the amount that I've learned just doing that. I say to people, like, I'd interviewed 300 people about starting a business before I started a business. And actually, that's a remarkably privileged position to be in, because
100%.
you've already learned that it's, you shouldn't get distracted. You should focus. You should, do this. You should get a solid shareholders agreement, even if it is your wife. You should get through this. And we still haven't done that, by the way. But yeah, there's a lot that you pick up. But also, you got to add value to the space. And I think this is the thing. And this, is a communications theme as well. People often think communications and marketing is about look at me, look at me, look at me, look at my product, buy my product, buy my product. And, it's really, we tend to say to people that 80% of the content you put out should be either educating, entertaining, inspiring, or doing all three to your audiences, because actually that's the way that you gain trust. That's the way that you become a trusted advisor to them, because if you're talking about their pain points, if you're talking about the things that they're interested in, and you're explaining things and themes that can help them in that, they're going to look to you for a different reason. They're going to follow you for a different reason. You're a trusted authority, which then when you turn around and say, hey, I'm selling this thing, it's sort of like in a macro way what I did in my whole career. I spent 12 years to, then just putting good stuff out into the space and favors and replying to every DM and having every coffee and getting people on the podcast, which obviously had two-way value, but like doing all that stuff. And then eventually I started a business where I had something to sell. And yeah, to your point, having that network at the time, we launched with 4 clients pretty much. We got the first 4 clients within 4 weeks, which was incredibly easy to do because I had the podcast and because, I recorded someone and then say, hey, what are you doing for your marketing? They're like, oh, it's actually a problem. I'm like, well, I'm doing this thing and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, that's what the podcast was. It was essentially like a marketing lever, really. It's just that it grows a few different heads over time.
I love that pillar of putting out things that are of value to people. And that for me is, maybe I'll just backtrack a bit then, because that for me is like a piece of advice that would be really, really great for people to take on board. And I'm sure you have lots more. I'd love to zoom out a little bit. So, you talked about your newsletters, Healthtech Pigeon, Biotech Dodo. So I want, through that, your bird's eye view, if you like,
nice,
of, I guess, the state of comms in the industry over the last few years, generally in digital health. Because obviously the people who, our listeners here are people watching generally might either be within Europe or US or the UK, but there'll be lots of people who are in other contexts as well. And, a lot of the content that we see in digital health right now is very UK, US and Europe focused. I'd love your view on the state of the industry. Where are we at now?
No, I totally get where you're coming from. So people talk about healthcare being behind quite a lot in various things. We still use fax machines, blah, blah, blah. Like the technology being behind. It's sort of been true, I guess, of communications broadly, I would argue. It's taken a while for the space to be big enough, I think, to have any sort of ecosystem, I would say. I guess I'm talking specifically about health tech and less so biotech maybe, although again there's arguments there, but in the health tech world particularly, it's not really existed for that long. And so it was only within my career lifetime, 10 years ago-ish, that we were calling it healthcare IT or health IT and informatics, health informatics and all this sorts of stuff. And it needed to do a comms job on itself, to be perfectly honest. It needed a bit of a rebrand, and a rebrand it got when digital started to come along and people started calling it digital health. And that was interesting because that brought a lot of attention as much as it, needing that rebrand because of the attention. So digital health then started becoming a thing, and we started seeing this telemedicine and all the rest of it. And then I think what happened is because of the sort of the Silicon Valley boom and all of that stuff started to reach healthcare. It then took on health tech because there was fintech, there was insure tech, there was agri tech, there was this tech, that tech, the other tech, and that's when health space tech or health dash tech started, and then when one word health tech finally came along. So it's been a kind of maturing along those lines, I would say. I think now we're pretty much sold on it being called health tech, and that's nice. And I think it gives us, a unified umbrella and an identity to come under. I think that what's happened is you've gone from a world broadly where big trade events, big trade publications, and nationally broadsheets and tabloids basically held the ring on communicating to all of your audiences. So if you wanted to get a message out to any of your audiences as a business, you had to go to one of those things. You had to get a space at a trade show and have a stall because you got footfall and you got human beings passing you, because there's no internet, there's no way of getting to those people. And similarly with the newspapers go everywhere. So you're beholden to an editor who you have to sell to that editor why your piece would be interesting to their listeners. And so you had this like very gated and guarded, like only a few points of entry to these big communities where you could, get your messages out. That's PR. That was the skill of PR. That was the whole Fleet Street world of like building relationships and getting in with the editors, and like, because that was the way you had to do it, because they owned the distribution to your audiences. Now, fast forward to now, today, what's happened is we've truly democratized the ability to build an audience. And so what it now is, from a PR standpoint, i.e. getting your message on other people's channels, is a basic definition of that. It's nuanced, but there are more channels to go to. You can go to those big trade magazines, those big broadsheets and nationals. You can get an article in the Telegraph, in the Times, etc. But no longer really is that to get your message to those audiences. That's about authority and credibility, because those are actually, they're still gated. But it means that if you get past that, you've got through the science editor of the Times, and actually then it means something. It still means something to be in the Times, even if you're a B2B business that is not really going to get bought by any of their readers. So that's changed. The other thing that's changed is that there are also now newsletters. There are smaller creators, i.e. influencers, basically anyone or anything with a distribution you can now sort of sell into. People with big newsletters, they get sold into all the time. We get sold into for Healthtech Pigeon all the time. We're 7,000 readers or whatever is on Healthtech Pigeon, but that's 7,000 people that might actually buy something, because all of them pretty much are health tech startups. And so actually that's an incredibly good audience to go to. Yeah, no, absolutely. We've concentrated that value there. Same for biotech. Biotech's a very disparate audience. It's very difficult to reach all of biotech, because biotech doesn't really centralize anywhere. They centralize around disease areas. So the cell and gene therapy ecosystem is the cell and gene therapy ecosystem. Why on earth would they care at all about the gut microbiome ecosystem or the tech bio in blah, blah, blah ecosystem? Like, it just doesn't matter. The liver disease drug discovery, they're not going to centralize in the same place. So again, that's what we've managed to do. There are these ways and means that happens and stuff. So it's changed, and social media then changed it again, really, all at the same time, because now you don't only have to sell into those people with audiences. Now literally anyone can have a social media platform, including you as a company. And so now what's changed in communications is that basically every company should become its own production company. Every company should be building audience, because rather than needing to buy the airwaves of others that are distributing into your community of customers and partners and blah blah, you should build that audience yourself, because you get the authority, you get the credibility, you get the trust, and then you own the audience. There's something that, if listeners want to look it up, called the PAYSO model of communications: paid, earned, shared, owned.
Yep.
And there are different channels, there are
good.
different ways of doing that. I did an article on that a few months ago that we sort of base the way that we do things on, but it's broadly what I've talked about there, in that you can pay to get your message to other people, put it on other people's channels, but pay them. You can earn it by doing the same thing. You can also own it. You can build a podcast that becomes your owned media, and you own that. You can own newsletter. That's your owned media. You own that newsletter. You own the email. And then shared on social media, because you're renting that platform off of either Google, Microsoft, Spotify, like whatever it is, like you're renting the channels and you're at the mercy of those people switching it off. So you should always be spreading your bets amongst those things, or at least in the early days getting owned and shared and then moving up to the others later.
That's really great. And so you've given us a good perspective on how, I guess, like distribution channels has evolved. And if I maybe just draw a parallel to underserved communities, low and middle income countries, in terms of the rebranding you talked about of like, before it was health IT, one of the big ways that it was talked about in, the late 2000s was also like M-Health. In India, in Africa, etc. And that's also changed as well. And somehow also I observe a rebranding towards like there's the global health space, which I wonder if it also needs a rebranding, because global health kind of is somehow interconnected with like colonization, that kind of mindset, and how that now there's this opportunity to like also decolonize global health. Like development funding has been cut, and now there's this opportunity to make decisions and like let things change on the ground. But around this, right, is this communication layer of like how do we change how we talk about it? So I just reflect some parallels with what what you talked about.
Words matter. Words absolutely matter, and there's a two-way relationship. We know this between language, emotion, perception, and you'll perceive reality differently because there's a word for something. In the same way that, I mean, you'll know this, like if for those with Parkinson's disease that unfortunately can't reflect their emotion, if a patient with Parkinson's disease can't smile, it makes them unhappy. And it's that two-way relationship between expression and feeling. And it's the same thing, if you give something a name, it will embody that, it will take that on, it will change in its perception. And we know that. And that's why we take these things so seriously, because if you're gonna give a sector a name like digital health, it's going to influence people as to how they interact with that sector and what they expect from that sector. And a venture capitalist will come along and say, well, why haven't we got a digital health fund? Because there's loads of things in digital health. And all of a sudden a VC fund pops up just because it's now got a collective of people using the same terminology that have united under that umbrella. And these things do matter. And we've seen this over time. Like in global health, it's incredibly important as well, because people have a perception, don't they? People have a perception of certain countries and certain ways that they live. And the way that you can influence that with language and with educating people on how they should talk about things in the right way in order to enact a change. All of this is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, that's a good segue into, our big picture of talking about the state of the industry. You talk about channels. And then part of it is like these, words matter into the actual content of the industry. And I think historically what I've observed in the evolution of the industry is, we've moved from thinking about marketing and comms as a way to, like you said at the beginning, look at me, look at the amazing things that we're doing, and marketing being seen as fueling hype in health tech and digital AI. I mean, there are still lots of examples of that. So I see this continuum with like hype and substance. And so in terms of like the actual content that we see, do you have anything to say about like the state of the industry in terms of the actual content? How maybe things have evolved? Where are we at now, especially with generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are at various stages of maturity on that, I would say. So on the Gen AI point, I think this is really fascinating because people have talked about, and I've even talked about, the LinkedIn is flooded with AI posts. The barrier to entry is now so low that people can sort of post anything and blah, blah, blah. My personal content has never performed better. So there are more posts out there to cut through, but my posts are doing, as I say, better than ever. And it's interesting because someone put a comment on one of my LinkedIn posts the other day, and honestly, this has stuck with me. This person said something along the lines of, this post actually stopped me scrolling because it's someone documenting something that they've actually done in the real world, not just talking about some theme. And I think that's the thing, is like marketing in some way, if you want to get cut through, is about differentiation. And you can cut through if you're different. And so I'm a contrarian by nature. I don't like going where everyone else goes. So I've always liked to stand out a little bit, which has obviously got me into a lot of good and a lot of bad situations. But in this it's good, because if I see people doing something, particularly when it's the path of least resistance, I don't think I'm alone in spotting that. I think most people can spot that. Most people can spot a post that hasn't taken very long to do, because it's either, lightly edited after ChatGPT or not. And so if I give you an example of someone like Derek Core, if you've seen Derek Core's posts, how long do you think Derek Core spends on one of those infographics?
So I know that he spends a long time because
Right. And that's all you need to say. And that's all you need to say. You know that so much time and effort has gone into those, and so does everyone else. So those posts, I would say, are incredibly likable, in inverted commas, because you're actually just giving that person a like out of respect, knowing that your like will boost their post and get it seen by more people, knowing that it will help the ecosystem. So that is a post of real value, that in a very human way, if rather than treating marketing like a tick box, which is again a pitfall that people fall into, of going like, oh, I need to put 3 posts out this week for the algorithm. I need to put 5 posts out this week for the algorithm, and like, at the end of the day, the algorithm is literally humans and their behavior at the other end, by the way, because the algorithm is just going to put posts in front of people that are doing well. So basically, just put posts out that people are most likely to find value from. That's going to take care of most of what you think the algorithm is looking for, trust me. And again, that's definitely missed by a lot of people. So it's about focusing on that value for content. It's not about arbitrarily thinking about what an algorithm is or what an algorithm does, or like blah blah blah. And of course, like, we create content at such a volume that, for clients and ourselves and the rest of it, that stuff does start to creep in, of like, okay, we can A/B test something, we can optimize for something, like, oh hey, actually when we put clients and their founders' faces on the posts, they do better. And it's like, yeah, but it's more a reflection of human nature, I think, than it is a reflection on what the LinkedIn algorithm wants. Because I don't think, I might be wrong, but I don't think the LinkedIn algorithm is doing image analysis and seeing what's on the image and then boosting certain posts based on what's in the... I just don't think it works that way. I think this is more a commentary on human nature than it is on anything else. And so with the generative AI posts, to sort of conclude my point and herd these cats back in, I think, yes, there's a lot more posts. I think, yes, there's a lot more to cut through. But I think if you approach your content with authenticity and you appeal to other human beings by either documenting what you're up to, sharing some genuine learning, or going out of your way to really research a topic and actually add some value that way of work, like, it is. And the people liking it are rewarding that. So it's that thing that people say, man, like, people are jealous of where you are, but they're not jealous of how you got there. Or they're jealous of what you got, but they're not jealous of how you got it.
And just to kind of paraphrase what you say, I think what I take away from this is, we're in this attention economy, right? Everyone's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And people think there's some kind of recipe to, if I tick these boxes, I'll craft my content strategy in a way. And actually, you could just step back and think, okay, what you really need to be able to, like you said, is differentiate. So while other people are zigging, you zag. How do you zag? Like, just share what you've learned and actually done in the world and share that, right? And that's what people appreciate. And 100%. I take away, that if you think about the algorithm and human behavior is kind of a black box as well. And so but it's a black box that we all kind of can relate to more than some kind of unseen, like, technical LinkedIn algorithm. Well, what's useful for people? What resonates with people? And so I like that message. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And human behavior is still a massive black box as well. I've been listening to a lot of Rory Sutherland stuff, and I'm reading his book as well.
I'm listening to it as well. It's so good.
The opposite of a good idea is also a good idea, like that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Like, and it's right, human behavior, human psychology, and he's fascinating. So he was, I think, head of the behavior. I think he started the behavioral insights division of Ogilvy. So massive global communications agency. absolutely fascinating stuff, that. And I think if you like, psychology is also marketing, or marketing is also psychology as well. And so a lot of those themes definitely play in.
I really like it because I'm reading his book at the moment called Alchemy, and
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the one I'm
there's
reading.
something that he says that is just so relevant for this audience. In terms of like academic rigor, we talk about the data that we want to have. How do we share our impact? You know, that's what a big thing I want to talk to you about. And what he talks about is we hyperfixate on like the logical steps that we need to take, when actually people don't actually work like that. We should also be thinking about the psychological steps that we should be taking, the psychological argument, which is often very different to the approach you would take if you were taking a purely logical, hey, we've got our objective data, that's what's going to present, convince people, we create our product, build the product, and people will come. And actually there's so much more to it as well, right? And so let's take that, let's go into this rabbit hole then, because I think one thing that I see, and when I talk to people who are building in global health, and anyone in digital health, I think we're so, especially in medicine, we talk a lot about how we need evidence, right? We need to show the evidence of effectiveness of this, and I think people skew that to, that means I need to show this, I need to do this clinical study that shows that I move this metric to this, and the p-value is this, and therefore it's statistically significant, and therefore that's going to tick the box for me. And now, why are people not buying this? Why are people not funding this more? What have I done? What have I missed in changing people's minds about this? Or why have people not actually adopted this?
Yeah.
Can you speak about that?
Yeah. The answer is emotion. So it's interesting. And again, the answer is because we're human, and really emotions are what drives us. Someone said to me once, you only want to exit your company because of how you think it will make you feel. And I was like, that's interesting, because perception is reality as well. And so really everything is just emotions and feelings. It's just that you think you'll feel a certain way when you achieve certain goals, and that's the reason you chase them. But anyway, to give some context on that. So if you think about an academic journal, right, and a scientific, let's say Nature, right, or any like biology, chemistry, physics, any scientific academic journal, by definition, what is in there is the most innovative stuff in existence right now. Fact. It's the most innovative. And yet it is presented in the most boring way possible. So I follow I actually follow a few now, like astrophysicists on TikTok, right? So anyone that says that TikTok is just like for dancing and all the rest of it, bear in mind, TikTok is empty pipes and you can fill them with whatever you want. You have to be very aggressive when you press and hold down and say not interested. You have to do that quite a lot to get it where you want. However, these astrophysicists are fantastic because they'll pull up a horrendously dull and boring academic journal presented in p-values and like sine waves and all this sort of stuff. They'll put that they'll green screen themselves, put that in the background, and then they'll just talk like this about like, hey, some amazing new thing has happened. This massive star, like really close to us, has just exploded. And actually, we've learned loads about what a black hole actually is, which is like a wormhole loop where you deform space and time and bend a wormhole into a wormhole and create a portal and like blah, blah, blah. And this is actual science. But they just present it in a story as a human on the screen telling a story, and it is captivating. If you're even vaguely interested, and who the heck is not interested in like portals to other dimensions, which by the way is actual science, when the fabric of space-time folds on itself and puts two, it's unbelievable that actually exists in real life, and yet it does. The only reason I know that is because a human being has translated a very boring journal into a TikTok channel, and they just explain whatever papers come out in that journal, they just explain it in normal terms. And so that is partly the answer, storytelling, in that we can do these things, and that scientific rigor is incredibly necessary. But that lives in that journal and nowhere else unless it's communicated externally. And that now is a comms plan, because those scientists that have done that experiment, research, whatever it is, want to have impact, I assume. And that's the reason that they've done that research, is to forward humanity by making sure the world knows about it. Now, so they have their message that they want to put out. Now, what they need to do is think about where they put that message. And the way to do that is to think about, who is my audience? So who do I want to get this message to? So if it's the public broadly, and it is of broad importance, hey, we've unlocked this portal to this dimension and there's some aliens there waving at us. Cool. You go to broadsheet nationals that are definitely going to cover this because it has massive implications for absolutely everybody. Who's the audience of absolutely everybody? The Times, the Telegraph, the Mirror, the da-da-da. Like, they obviously care about that stuff because it's of national importance. So they would go to them, and you see it. You see every now and again the BBC will present something that's come out in an academic journal. It's not that common, but they do. Once a month, maybe, I see it on BBC News, something academic that they've translated. But actually, for those people, if it's something more niched that has an audience either in a certain country or certain demographic in a country or in a certain field, then you've got to think, okay, where do those people absorb information? They'll follow certain people on certain social platforms. They'll read certain publications. They'll watch certain news channels. They'll watch certain things on their phone. And so once you then figure out where your target audiences absorbs information, you now know where to put your information in order to get it seen, heard, and known, and therefore create your impact. And so, again, you can then pay for it to be there. You can earn the right for it to be there. You can own your own distribution to those channels by building it, or you can share it, i.e., like social platforms, blah, blah, blah. So my point is, you then once you know your target audience, you've got your message, then great, you know where to put it, and you can either pay for it or earn it, basically.
And on the so we've got these good principles on how to do this right. You've talked about storytelling and doing that translational piece so that people are like, wow. Do you have some principles on how to do the what? Because you've said you've done the who, we've done the where, the what. How do you do the what? How do you tell that story?
Great question. I actually saw a really great talk from Vernon at Havas about this at one of their events. If you look up storytelling, there are a few. You'll have heard of story arcs, right? So there's you'll have heard of something called the redemption arc, where the protagonist will have a good time, then a bad time, then a good time again. They'll go through their redemption.
The hero's journey.
Exactly. Others will be different shapes of good and bad of what your protagonist will do. And those are all ways of telling a story. So if you point to any fictional story book, they will generally follow one of these 4 story arcs of a way to tell a story. The interesting thing is, though, beyond that, there's actually no fixed way. And we talk about this all the time in something as simple as a pitch deck. So a lot of people will come to me and say, can you look at my investor deck? And they'll go, I followed the Sequoia version, the 10 problem, solution, market size, competitors. I followed, got their template and followed that. Other people go, I chose this one or this one or this one. The interesting thing is, if you followed one of those templates, okay, fine, it'll be good to a 60, 70% most likely, might be 100, might be 0, but chances are it's around 60, 70% right. Generally, the feedback that I give, and bearing in mind, Jess and I have done our first angel investment now, I've run accelerators for years, pitch decks, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of them in a critiquing mentality. The advice that I give on pitch decks is forget an order, get the order of the slides out the window. Tell me the story. Imagine I'm an investor sat here right now. Tell me a story exactly how you would tell it about what your company's up to and why I should invest in you. Every single person will start somewhere different. Some people will start with, I grew up on a farm and when I was 3, my dad had a stroke. Other people will say, I was doing this incredibly specific research at university and I discovered blah. Other people will say, I had 4 opportunities, each were great, and this one struck me because people are going to tell this story loads of different. That is the order that your story should be in. That is the order that your pitch deck should be in. It's never a good idea, I don't think, apart from first draft maybe, to do that kind of what's the problem, what's the solution, what's the market size. The best pitch decks are ones that just tell your story, because you can't kid me that the same 10 things in that order is the best way to tell everyone's investment story. If we accept that isn't the case, then we accept that there is an optimal way to tell your story through a pitch deck. Because, and again, to add some more flesh to the bones here, some elements of what you do in your story will be stronger than others that you'll want to place up front. I spoke to someone last week, one of our clients, in fact, that it took until slide 4 to say that they had traction with a UK hospital group and a hospital group from a different country. And what they were doing was pretty similar to what loads of people are doing that haven't got any contracts. It's just one of the sort of, standard ideas, inverted commas, done very specifically in their way. But the point that their differentiator was these 2 massive contracts. It's like, okay, get that on slide 1, slide 2 maximum.
Bury the lead. Don't bury the lead.
Yeah, because actually, what's their back to marketing being differentiation to some degree. Hey, we're an XYZ company, but we got 2 contracts. You're like, now I'm listening, because I'm used to XYZ companies having 0 contracts and telling me they're going to get contracts in 5 years. Exactly. Yeah. I've got a letter of intent. I've got blah, blah, blah. No. We've got 2 signed contracts and money in the bank from 2 big hospital groups. Right. Okay. That definitely needs to come up front, because as the investor, I'm already assuming that 98 of my 100 decks I'm going to review that day are terrible. And if I say 100% are terrible, I'm only wrong twice and I can deal with that. So basically, an investor's default is this is terrible. And 98% of the time, they'd be right, which is a fantastic place to be, which is why investors don't care about saying no. They just don't care about saying no. You've got to be exceptionally good for them to say yes. And yeah, they've got dry powder that they need to invest at some point, but so they can be more lenient in those times. But basically, yeah, you're battling against the no. So you want to tell that story as optimally as possible. And frankly,
you need to light up their amygdala, right? In terms
100%,
of like, hey, like,
100%.
If you're looking at 100, like what are the things that need to stand out? I love it.
Yeah. And frankly, you just need feedback. You just need feedback from people.
Constant feedback.
Honest feedback from people as to how to tell this better. And you'll all know a good storyteller in your network, and they'll be very natural at it. They'll be very good. They'll be the people that are always at the dinner party, or the father of the bride's speech, or at any wedding, they'll captivate everybody with their stories or whatever. It's that person. You want to get feedback from that person, because that people, no matter what industry they're in, will know how to spin a yarn, and they will know. They will automatically do those story arcs without even thinking about it, because they've just got an internal alarm that goes off before anyone else, which says, this is boring, I need to make it more exciting. It's just that their alarm goes off before yours. So
very good.
Yeah.
I really like that. And that's such great actionable stuff that people who are kind of living these problems will be able to take away. Impact investors, funders, foundations, they will also be responding in a similar way, I think, to you would be. I think another thing that people struggle with is in this space as well, is in terms of the story is, hey, we've got this evidence that we either have been generating or intend to generate about the value that we are trying to create in this health system or for patients. And they're trying to approach then, how do I communicate that evidence? Maybe not so much as a pitch deck, but as a story. How do I make this resonate with either some like a health system that I want to work with, or people that are like clinicians that I want to convince to adopt this technology, or a community to build trust with them of like, hey, and turning that from this like dry thing of like, hey, this has created this clinical outcome and this has done this. Hasn't it been fantastic to kind of more towards what you're saying? How might people approach that?
So the first thing that I would say is that whilst you might think certain metrics are boring, like reduces clinical outcomes or improves clinical safety by blah, 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 there is a metric that the person you care about cares about most. Whatever that metric is will be exciting to them. End of story. So if it's the finance director, they care about in-year savings. They care about ROI in year, or in the first 2 years, or whatever it is, first few months ideally. So really it's back to knowing your audience, knowing the situation, knowing what you need to present, and presenting that in the right way, in the right story that, ticks their boxes. That's the first thing that I would say. But the other thing that I would say, if you are going for more broad appeal, or, it's a presentation of a deck that's got loads of people in the audience or whatever, is to think about, well, who cares about attention also as a proxy? And that's media broadly. So what would media do? And who's very good at this? Like the Daily Mail. What would the Daily Mail do? So if you take that evidence, or that statistic, or whatever it is, what does the Daily Mail do? They attach a story and they attach a narrative to it, and they try and incite some emotion. They don't use their powers for good very often, unfortunately, but they are very good at it, in that they will think about the second order, third order consequences of this. And again, thinking of that in a very positive way, there's a fantastic advert that McDonald's did, which is a full page ad in a newspaper. And it's a picture of a blue sky with a couple of clouds on it. And you can see in the corners that it's a car sunroof. And it's got loads of seagulls that are stood on the roof peering over, and they're looking at you. You're the vision from inside the car. And it's just got the McDonald's M, the golden arches. Now that is a fantastic example of what are the second order consequences, or what are the third order consequences to ordering a McDonald's. Because it's delicious and you're sat in a car, what's going to happen is the seagulls are going to want to come and eat it, and that's going to cause you a problem. And that's funny. That's good use of humor. You've told a story within an image. But that's the thing about second and third order stuff. Obviously, in media, they'll do it a bit more obviously, like, this thing has happened, which might lead to this, and it's probably going to lead to this, and they'll create that story and that narrative from it. But you can do that in a very positive way, in that, by increasing clinical outcomes, like your headline might be, hey, your clinical nurse specialist in diabetes is about to get really bored, or your clinical nurse specialists in diabetes are now going to have the time to do loads of other stuff, and then because of this, or what, like, you can think about interesting ways to present that go beyond just the statistic. Because that clinical outcomes will improve money, and it will reduce litigation and the risk of that, and therefore and all these things are true. And to your one person that cares about that stuff specifically, that is going to chime. But in a very human way, that person will still relate if you're opening with, your clinicians are about to get quite blah because of blah. So there's interesting ways to present that.
So what to me?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I really like that. And just riffing off that then as well. So recently I was in Geneva for a global digital health conference, and we did something that's unusual. We told stories about failure.
Yeah.
We told stories about things that had gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that was by far the most engaging thing that I've been to for a while. I've been to a lot of conferences, and we got lots of good feedback. That was the thing that really resonated with people. And I wanted to put this to you because people don't talk about this in our industry, really. They might talk about it internally within their organizations, but there isn't really space in comms to talk about things that have gone wrong because I guess we're just set up to be, hey, we need to talk about these metrics that we've hit, or these things are what resonate with people. When actually, when you're doing the hard yards, and if you're talking about doing, and that thing that you talked about, that person who stopped scrolling because this was a thing about that actually happened that they could relate to, most of the things that actually happen are things that are challenges or went wrong, I would say. And so have you got a take on a way to communicate that makes it okay for shareholders and the CEO to be okay with talking about, for this kind of, like, I guess, like, broader, more real conversation that needs to happen in our industry?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that is smaller community and more behind closed doors stuff. So, or less behind closed doors. That makes it sound a bit too private. I don't necessarily mean that, but I think I think it's incredibly necessary these days to set up spaces, and I don't mean literally, I mean sort of figuratively there, just set up spaces where you can be honest. This is one of the best moves I ever made without really knowing it was at the time, that when before COVID, I started doing these little events at the Health Foundry, which was like a digital health co-working space in Waterloo. Super nice, just little tiny space, like 30 people, 20 people that came to these things. And I called them Healthtech Talks. And basically I used to interview a founder, and I just used to say, like, look, this isn't for online. This is just like, we're going to be honest here. We're just going to talk about like the things that happened and like blah, blah, blah. And I can remember Mike, one of the guys that came, he ran an ENT device startup, and he was just so unbelievably honest and raw about the difficulties and the things that they got wrong, and like just loads of stuff in manufacturing and contracting and like all this sort of stuff, the mistakes that he made. Super honest, and like it's very cathartic for people because they just felt like they could ask really good questions and all that sort of stuff. And that was fantastic in that space. And it was so unbelievably necessary. And eventually 2 people from Google came and said, can we do these in Google? And then the same philosophy applied there of like, hey, this is a closed shop here. Like we're going to let these people be honest on stage. And of course you're a bit more, when there's 250 people rather than 20, you're a bit less kind of free to say that sort of stuff. But the point is that community is becoming so unbelievably important. And here's the thing, which is going to be news to some people: not everything needs to go on social media. Not everything needs to go on LinkedIn. You can get your therapy. You can get whatever it is you need. Like, you already do these things. You'll see a therapist. You'll get your mental health sorted by someone. You don't put that on LinkedIn. There's no need to. You don't need to put your failures on your LinkedIn in order to get the catharsis of actually like figuring that out. It's just that really what you should be seeking, I think, is a safe space to do so.
I think that's psychological safety. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the big opportunity. I think, broadly in marketing now for corporate marketing companies, for startups, for individuals and personal brands. I think owning a community around something that is in and around your space, and not thinking first and foremost about the commercial value to it, just knowing that if you set up a community of value, it's going to benefit you in some way. I think that is the biggest move you should be making in 2025.
You're absolutely right. So many good lessons there. James, we're coming towards the end, but if I can, I'd love to ask you about a few quick tips or quick fire questions, if that's all right. What are some of the biggest traps, anti-patterns to avoid in your comm strategy or execution?
Focusing on selling and not focusing on giving value.
Amazing. Do you have any advice on how a founder can get to a unique value proposition that really resonates?
Feedback. Find those
and from
people
whom?
And ask them.
From whom the feedback?
The exact person that value proposition should chime with.
Yeah, great.
And if you ask for advice, you'll get money. If you ask for money, you'll get advice. So do with that what you will.
Very good. Yeah, I like that. What signs can you look out for in your comms that it's kind of off or not resonating with people and that you need to change things?
It's not performing well.
Yeah.
It's not meeting your business goals. End of story.
What's the biggest lesson in comms that you've learned in your journey?
If you give without the expectation of receiving, everything will get better.
Amazing. And final thing, we've mentioned one book with Rory Sutherland. Any other articles or books on this topic or other resources that could help people with their comm strategy, wrestling with this stuff?
I would say an interesting book to read would be this one. Emotion
I can't
by
see
Design.
it. Hold on.
Emotion by Design.
Emotion by Design. You've got it.
Emotion by Design.
Amazing.
That is by the chief or ex-chief marketing officer of Nike.
Super. Okay. I'm definitely putting that on my list. James, what a pleasure and a privilege it has been to hear about your journey, hear about some of your key pillars of what you've learned building a comms agency. So much great kind of stuff to take away if you're founding, if you're in policy, of how to reach people, how to get your message to resonate. And I love your message at the end of like giving. That's what it's all about. Giving to people, creating value for people, and the rest kind of comes around that. So if you can get into that mindset and that approach, then good things happen. And the other thing I want to say, if SomX and James have been connected to this space, I will put a link to the work that you guys have done with Chic, with the Community Health Impact Coalition, with community health workers, actually propagating the voice of community health workers and the impact that they're having. It's a super awesome series. So I'm going to connect that because that's a really, really good example, again, of great storytelling in this space.
Thanks,
so
man.
if you're really thinking about how James and his work has walked the talk on this for the global health community, that's a place to look at it. So yeah, James, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights. It's been really, really great having you on this podcast. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.